really strong show today, titled "It Is What It Is," because that's what the president seems to think about the greatest death rate in American history. We're going to get to that in 3.5 minutes. Please stay tuned. Don't turn away. We'll be right back.
Crisis now because the port was the nation's center for food storage and distribution during the global pandemic.
You mean it wasn't an attack, as Donald Trump said that it was?
No. The Middle East just emerged from an intense heat wave, with temperatures soaring to 125 degrees Fahrenheit in several regions. This week, a new study projects that rising temperatures caused by man-made climate change will cause more deaths from heat extremes than all infectious diseases combined in coming decades, unless governments act swiftly to cut emissions. And according to the study from Climate Impact Lab, poorer, hotter nations of the world will struggle the most to adapt to unbearable heat conditions that will kill increasing numbers of people by the end of the century.
Well, we'll get to that later, I guess.
The consequences of economic inequality are beginning to unfold already in the United States, as millions of Americans could soon lose electricity as temporary bans on power shutoffs implemented because of the coronavirus begin expiring in states across the country, right as summer temperatures are building and health officials are urging people to stay home to slow the spread of COVID-19 infections. But there is some good news.
Thank you. I'll have some.
Deutsche Bank has joined other major global banks in announcing it will no longer finance any new oil and gas projects in the Arctic.
That is good.
General Motors says it is teaming up with EVgo to expand its public electric vehicle charging network.
Also good.
It will be adding nearly 3,000 electric vehicle fast chargers across the United States.
Also good.
Oil major Royal Dutch Shell announced it is partnering with a Dutch utility company to build a super hybrid offshore wind farm that will pair wind energy with batteries and a floating solar generating facility that will also generate clean hydrogen, and all without subsidies.
So some of these oil companies actually are finally moving away from fossil fuel?
Yes.
Very good.
It's part of Shell's goal to become a net zero emissions energy business no later than 2050.
Take your time.
And finally, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, a coalition of northeastern states that implemented a market-based cap-and-trade system to cut greenhouse gas emissions, has actually resulted in a nice side benefit: healthier kids. Researchers at Columbia University found that reducing emissions also avoided the impacts of toxic air pollution on children's health, such as asthma, preterm births, and low birth weights. And they estimated that the initiative also reduced healthcare costs for those states, delivering an economic savings of between $200 to $350 million.
Very good news. Too bad about that whole sending them back to school during a pandemic thing.
Well, there's that.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Live from our nation's capital, it's the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Good afternoon, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine, reporting live, a short, safe, social distance from Washington, D.C. It is what it is. That's what the president said about the greatest death rate in American history. More Americans have died in the past 4 months than at any other 4-month period in American history. More than in the Civil War, more than in World War II, more than in the Great Depression, more even than in the Great Spanish Flu pandemic of 1918. We hold the record in these times, and you're living through them. We've also had more economic decline in the last 4 months than at any time in all of American history. That includes the Great Depression. More people suddenly out of work, more people suddenly unemployed. Now, I know what you're saying. You might say, well, Mark, the Great Depression was worse. Yes, over a 4, 5, 6 year period. The Civil War was worse over a 4-year period. But for 4 months, the last 4 months, the 4 months you and I are living through, it is an American apocalypse. Hundreds of thousands. Yeah, we have 156,000 now. We're going to get to 200,000 at least before it's all over. Remember when 3,000 Americans murdered on 9/11 was considered a big deal? Yeah, we're at 50 times that, 51, 52. I don't know, maybe today it's 53. It's a 9/11 every couple days in America. And the president, well, his response is, it is what it is. Kind of reminds me when Jeb Bush was asked about all the many mass shootings across America, and his response was, stuff happens. Donald Trump's, it is what it is. You know, even when Hurricane Katrina came and ravaged the United States, causing about 1,000 people to die, or 156th the damage Trump has gone, George Bush was heavily criticized for the federal failure to respond. And he could say, well, it was a natural attack, it was, but we could have done more. The coronavirus is, of course, a natural virus. Donald Trump didn't start the coronavirus. But the coronavirus is a worldwide pandemic. And virtually everywhere in the world, dare I say every single other place in the world, handled it better than we did in the United States of America. South Korea got their first case on the same day we did. They have a population of 50 million. They've had 300 or so deaths. Our population is 6 times South Korea's. Our death count is 500 times South Korea's. Why is that? The president sat down for an interview with a real reporter for once. Now, you know, he likes to normally go on Fox News and talk with all the toadies that are paid to try to make him look good. But maybe because he realized that, hey, the rest of us who know what propaganda is might want to hear from a real reporter, with him declining in the polls, with Joe Biden doing very well. He sat down with a real reporter, and that's where we got the statement, it is what it is. I want to play for you this hour a lot of that interview. Maybe you've heard some of it, but I also want to comment on it. It shows not just a president out of touch, well, we accuse George Bush of being out of touch. This is much, much worse than out of touch. This is a president who literally doesn't understand what he's talking about. Literally hands out charts that he doesn't know what they say. He's kind of like the third grader that hasn't prepared for their book report, except most third graders fake it better. It's important to understand, because I know that liberals get how out of touch the president is, and frankly, most Republicans I talk to will tell me privately they recognize that a completely incompetent, corrupt, narcissistic moron is supposedly running our country. Now, luckily for us, most of the time he spends watching TV and playing golf. And of course, it's better to have no one in control than someone actively running the country into the ground. But I do think the interview gives a lot of insight into how Donald Trump thinks. So, buckle in, strap up. It is what it is.
There are those that say, you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the
What
books.
manuals?
Read the books.
What books?
What testing do?
So just catch that little part, right? There are those that say we test too much. Donald Trump is great with that. There are those that say, people say, they said to me, sir, you're a hero, sir. Who said that? The people, them, those, they. So good for Jonathan Swan. He says, who? Who says that? Who says we test too much? What are their names? Oh, they're manuals. Manuals? Books. What manuals? What books? Trump, of course, has none. He just says stuff. There are manuals, there are people, there are books, there are things, there are people out there that say these things. Who? What people? Who are they? What are their manuals? What are their books? People, manuals, books. I guess he's just used to dealing with morons. Either morons that believe it, or people who know that he's basically full of BS and are just willing to let it go. This reporter asked him, what people, what manuals, what books? Donald Trump never answers the question. We'll move on from there, but I do want to play that little clip first, once again.
There are those that say, you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manuals?
Read the
What
books.
manuals?
Read the books.
What books?
What testing does?
I'm sorry.
Wait a minute, Jonathan. Let me explain. What testing does, it shows cases. It shows where there may be cases.
I've covered you for a long time. I've gone to your rallies. I've talked to your people. They love you.
Now this next part's interesting, and I'm moving between clips. The reporter, Jonathan Swan, asked Donald Trump about Tulsa. He points out that the president planned a rally in public of people close together without wearing masks. In fact, Jonathan Swan hasn't mentioned this, but they actually removed the stickers that were on the seats of this indoor stadium in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that told people not to sit too close together. They removed those stickers so people sat close together. Herman Cain, remember Herman Cain, Mr. 999, ran for president in 2012, I think it was? Yeah, he died last week. Donald Trump killed him. Donald Trump killed Herman Cain. Now, I don't mean that Donald Trump took out a gun and shot Herman Cain. He didn't have to. He merely encouraged Herman Cain to come to a rally with thousands of other people without a mask, without social distancing. And Herman Cain, having drunk the Kool-Aid, actually bragged about the fact that no one was wearing a mask. Herman Cain is now dead. Hundreds of others are dead. All told, Donald Trump has killed approximately 156,000 Americans and counting. And no, I'm not counting all of them. I understand that a few hundred were probably going to die. A few hundred died in South Korea. I'm talking about the excess deaths. I'm talking about the 99% of the 157,000 people that didn't need to die, that wouldn't have died if we had real leadership. But when it comes to deaths, Donald Trump's response is, it is what it is.
Listen to you. They listen to every word you say. They hang on your every word. They don't listen to me or the media or Fauci. They think we're fake news. They want to get their advice from you. And so when they hear you say everything's under control, don't worry about wearing masks, I mean, these are people, many of them are older people,
What's
Mr.
your
President.
definition of control? Yeah, under the
It's giving them a false sense of
right
security.
now, I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They are dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
They are dying. It's true. It is what it is. The reporter points out, people are listening to you. Okay, liberals don't listen to you. We know better. We don't risk our lives for some narcissistic buffoon. But your people do. Your supporters do. I know you don't give a damn about liberals, but you're killing your own supporters. Some of them are older people, Mr. President, meaning they're more likely to catch COVID. Donald Trump's response to 1,000 Americans dying a day. It is what it is. We'll be right back right after this.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You could say, how are you, or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You could write him a text or knit him a sweater. If you can't be together, you could write him a letter.
Okay, Facebook audience, we are in a commercial break, which I am saving you from listening to. By the way, really exciting thing. Next week, we finally should have our phones working so that you can dial in again. When we've moved from the radio show to my in-home studio here, we had to cut off phone calls until we could work it out. We've worked out the technology. Starting next week, cross your fingers, we will have a live show with phone calls. And I'll definitely want to hear from you there. So looking forward to that. We'll be right back to this show in 3 minutes. My producer is reminding me to tell you that when we dial in, but not this, it's a little tricky, not this week, but if you're watching on archive next week, next Thursday, August 13th, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 Central, 1 Mountain, noon Pacific, you can dial in at 888-488-MARK, 888-488-MARK. Yeah, I spelled it the right way, not that fancy French way. M-A-R-K, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275, and you'll be able to reach us and chat with me and let me know where you think I'm right and where you think I'm wrong. So that's next week, starting August 13th. Be back in 2 minutes.
History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day a release of flammable vapor led to a fire at the Chevron refinery in Richmond, California. A level 3 community warning system alert was issued for the cities of Richmond, San Paulo, and North Richmond. Toxic black smoke could be seen for miles while the fire burned for hours. 19
Alex,
workers were nearly incinerated trying to escape the fire. More than 15,000 area residents sought medical treatment for chest pains, breathing problems, headaches, and sore throats. The Chemical Safety Board found that the release was caused by a leaking pipe that eventually ruptured. The pipe, made of carbon steel, suffered sulfidic corrosion. The Chemical Safety Board noted that for 40 years, the refinery industry had known that carbon steel corrodes at a much faster rate than higher chromium content steel pipe. The pipe in question had no shutoff valve to isolate the leak. In its final report, the Chemical Safety Board issued a number of findings. They found that Chevron knew of the corrosion but did nothing to prevent it. As well, Chevron not only failed to perform 100% component inspections, but it also rejected earlier recommendations to inspect and replace the pipe that would eventually fail. When it came to emergency response, Chevron failed to identify and communicate process controls or damage mechanisms in the incident command structure. They also had no leak response guidance or formal protocol to determine how to handle a process leak. The Chemical Safety Board found the safety culture lacking. Workers were reluctant to use their stop work authority and were often encouraged to continue operations despite hazardous conditions. The Chemical Safety Board issued a number of recommendations, including more stringent regulatory enforcement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
And now, the voice of reason in an unreasonable world, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. As we dissect the Axios interview, I have to say I can't think of a more fitting epitaph to the Donald Trump presidency. It is what it is. This is a guy that came into office after President Obama, arguing that we had entered an age of carnage, that 2016 was an age of massive carnage, and that he was going to make America great again, right? It was terrible under Obama, and he was going to make us great again. By the way, he didn't even make up that slogan again. He stole it from Ronald Reagan, who said, "Make America great again." Ronald Reagan, of course, was the president who took us through the 80s, largely to undo the civil rights era of the 1960s. And when he said, "Make America great again," he meant go back to the 1950s when blacks weren't allowed to vote and were second-class citizens. Not that they're first-class citizens yet today, but there's no question that black Americans were better off under Obama than they were under Reagan, and certainly better than they were in the 1950s. But Donald Trump, Did he make America great again? Sometimes when you're in a historic moment, you don't recognize the historic nature of the moment you're in. I know you think 2020 is a bad year. So do I. I'm sitting at home. So are you, if you're responsible. It's been a tough year. Do you know someone who's died of coronavirus? I do. I've lost friends and family to coronavirus. Have you? I'm surprised if you haven't. It's 157,000 Americans. You know, I distantly knew someone who died on September 11th. But this is in everyone's homes. We all are suffering. And of course, the virus is a natural thing. Some idiot ate a bat in South China and spread it all around the world. But every other country has figured out how to handle this except us. We like to think of American exceptionalism as being that we are uniquely good, uniquely rich, uniquely powerful, uniquely more democratic, uniquely fair. We like to think we live in the best country on earth. The world pities us now. We are pathetic. They recognize that this once leading world power, the United States of America, we used to be considered the leader of the free world, is now flat on its back, unable to stop a virus that not only industrialized countries have managed to stop, South Korea and Germany and Taiwan, but even unindustrialized countries, even African countries whose GDP, their gross domestic product, is smaller than that of our smallest states. The other world, and I think the reason why, and they never really addressed this in the interview, but I really think the reason why the rest of the world has gotten it and we haven't is that America has this penchant for individualism, right? No one can tell us what to do. Liberty, right? We want freedom. And our freedom, unfortunately, often involves the freedom to harass, infect, and kill other Americans. Now, I've long argued that our freedom as Americans is only limited to ourselves. You have freedom to do what you want with your own body. You don't have freedom to do what someone else doesn't want with their body. The same's true when you breathe a deadly infection in their face. So I get that we were uniquely unable to handle this, and I also get that if you look at the statistics, you find that the states where people did wear masks, where people did practice social distancing, the localities where they did, people tend to be better. This is a virus that began in the blue states because the blue states are full of cities, and people in cities tend to travel outside the country more. And now it's mostly in the red states because the people in the blue states took precautions. And many people in the red states did not. Trump is killing his own people. Now, am I saying Trump wants hundreds of thousands of Americans dead? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying he doesn't care. I'm saying that hundreds of thousands of Americans die, and Donald Trump is concerned about Donald Trump. It's not so much that he wants his Americans dead, it's just that he really doesn't care. It is what it is. I'll play that clip again, because I think it's worth hearing again, and then I'll move on to more from the interview.
I've gone to your rallies. I've talked to your people. They love you. They listen to you. They listen to every word you say. They hang on your every word. They don't listen to me or the media or Fauci. They think we're fake news. They want to get their advice from you. And so when they hear you say everything's under control, don't worry about wearing masks, I mean, these are people, many of them are older people,
What's
Mr.
your
President.
definition of control? Yeah. Under the
It's giving them a false sense of security.
Now, I think it's under control. I'll tell you what.
How? 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
Right now, I think it's under control, the president said. Right now, I think it's under control, the president said. Right now. If this is under control, what's not under control look like? As the reporter says, 1,000 Americans are dying a day.
They're dying. That's true. And it is what it is.
Okay. First truthful thing we've ever heard the president say that I can remember. They're dying. It's true. It is what it is. Yeah, it is.
That doesn't mean we aren't doing everything we can. When I took over, we didn't even have a test. Now, in all fairness,
why would you have a test?
There was no test.
The virus
for
didn't
this.
exist. How would you have a test?
I was going to say.
Okay. Death is going up now.
Okay.
So he says, in fairness, Obama didn't have a test to prevent the novel coronavirus that did not exist in 2016. That's true. That's true. He didn't have a test for it. He didn't have a test to prevent the Great Plague of 2047 either. Why not, Obama? Why didn't you have a test to stop the Great Plague of 2047 or the one of 2319? Why haven't you stopped the future alien monsters from invading the United States? Just because we don't know they exist yet? Is that your excuse, Obama? Yeah, we didn't have a test. It's true. Until we had the disease. But that's how Trump's mind thinks. Let's go on.
There's no test.
The virus
for
didn't
this.
exist. How would you have a test?
I was going to say.
Okay. Death is going up now.
Okay,
and it's 1,000 a day.
If you look at death.
Yeah, it's going
let's
up
look.
again.
Let's look.
Daily death.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death.
Yeah. Started to go up
Here's
again.
one. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories.
The United States is lowest in numerous categories, he says, staring at a piece of paper like he's never seen it before.
We're lower than the world.
Lower than the
lower
world?
than
What is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look.
In what?
Take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
You can't do that. You have
Why
to go,
can't I do that?
You have to go by which.
You can't do that. You can't look at death as a percentage of population. That's not right. We don't care about the rate of death in America. Oh, Donald. We'll be right back right after this.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing?
Okay,
What happens if I
break,
mix these
folks.
two things together? How are babies made? What
You
does this thing do?
YouTube Live, folks, you're the real insiders. You get to hear me during the breaks. Take a break. Back in 3.
Don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I'm Brenda Gazar, the host of Code WAC, your podcast on the state of America's broken healthcare system and how Medicare for All could help. Here's what we're talking about this time. Today, we'll talk about the obstacles in achieving Medicare for All on a national and state level. Michael Lighty has organized, advocated, and developed policy for single-payer Medicare for all nationally and in California for nearly 29 years. He's a founding fellow of the Sanders Institute. Most recently, he was the Healthcare Constituency Director for Bernie 2020. Welcome to Code Whack, Michael.
Thank you, Brenda. It's great to be here.
In our last pod, you talked about a reluctance on the part of national politicians to work toward Medicare for all. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a misunderstanding of the politics. I think there's an ideological commitment to a private insurance system. And I think there's a donor network, both at the political level and at the philanthropic level through foundations that are simply bought into an institutional politics that says the private sector is better. We can't win it, right? We can't overcome the power of the healthcare industry. So we're just going to come up with, much more complex solutions as a workaround. And it's reinforced by Democrats who support it but don't fight for it. It's reinforced by think tanks that are on the liberal side that don't promote it. And so you basically got, what I say is, if everyone who said they supported Medicare for all actually worked to enact it, we would win it tomorrow. So we have a political problem, a problem of political will.
Got it. Thanks so much, Michael. Get the full Code Whack story on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. You can also listen to our episodes at www.heal-ca.org. This podcast is powered by Heal California.
Back to the Aggressive Progressive, Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Mark Levine. We've been listening to the interview of Donald Trump on Axios, and I've listened to the whole 37 minutes. You really should as well. I know it's painful to listen to this incompetent, weird guy who slipped into office because of the Electoral College and Comey and Putin and by just sheer accident. But I do think that Donald Trump reflects a larger idea within the Republican Party, at least the Republican Party post Ronald Reagan. The Republican Party has been running against government for 40 years now. Their view is the government cannot solve any problems, and therefore we must end the government. We must weaken the government. We must give the government as little power as possible, so that when an economic collapse comes, caused by a novel coronavirus, their response is, let the plague go, let the virus go. Don't need to wear a mask, don't need to protect yourself. As for economic collapse, Republicans insist that the tens of millions of Americans who've lost their jobs in this pandemic do it because they're too lazy to work. And this fits in with the Republican narrative. You go back to Mitt Romney, and I praise Mitt Romney and that he's willing to stand up against Donald Trump's corruption. But remember when Mitt Romney talked about, what was it, the 47%? Half of all Americans right now live paycheck to paycheck. I don't know whether you're one of them or not, but if you're not, you need to realize the other half are. That's not a small statistic. Romney was complaining that the half that barely can afford rent and food are not paying sufficient taxes. But the Republican idea is, you know what? You know the reason they're not working, the reason they're not making money? They're just too lazy. Half of America is too lazy. Compare them to, say, a Donald Trump, who spends all day on the golf course or watching Fox TV, who really hasn't worked very hard very much in his life, calling other people lazy. So for 40 years, Republicans have said, economic injustice, racial injustice, the fact that so many Americans are struggling, that's nobody's business. It's certainly not the government's business. They don't believe that we can form a more perfect union whereby we collectively get together and help those of us who are struggling get a fair path, or help Black Americans just get an equal shot, which unfortunately they've never had in America. And so I do think Donald Trump's musings, while he's particularly bad at being president, are not that atypical from the standard Republican line, right? Look and see what we're doing well and just ignore, sweep under the rug what's not going well. Let's talk about Donald Trump's statistics, and I honestly don't believe he knew what was in his actual papers in his hand, because he said, we're lower, we're better. And he must have asked his staff to find some place where we're better. Well, it turns out that if you're already sick, if you already have the coronavirus, if you've already been listening to the president and not worn your mask and caught the disease, that our healthcare system has managed to kill fewer than in some other countries per person sick. But we have 1,000 times the number sick as other countries have. 1,000 times per person. That's why the reporter points out that it's the death per person that matters, per population that matters, not the death per case. Our cases are off the charts. We're 5% of the world's population. We're some 30% of the world's cases. We're some 25% of the world's deaths. Let's go back to the interview.
Look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why not as a proportion of population?
When we have somebody, what it says is when you have somebody that has, where there's a case, the people that live from those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X population and X percentage of death of that population versus South Korea.
You have to go by the cases.
Well, look at South Korea, for example. 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy compared to
that.
I do. It's on the.
Don't know that.
You think they're faking their statistics? South Korea?
I won't get into that because I have a very good relationship with the country. But you don't know that.
1,000 Americans.
So you don't know that. So whenever Donald Trump faces a statistic that he doesn't like, he just calls it a lie, right? I mean, this is the guy that claimed that, let's see, that Barack Obama was born in Kenya, that Ted Cruz's father killed Kennedy, that Trump University was a real university, even it was basically telling people to watch YouTube videos for $35,000 a year. This is the guy who makes up lies like, well, I think the record is, I think he's done 40,000 since he's been president. I have to look. The count keeps growing up. It's something like 25 a day. I'll look up the numbers. But for him, lying is just what you do every day to get through the day, because he makes no distinction between truth and lying. So I guess he assumes everyone else is lying, because in Donald Trump's world, what's true is what makes him look good, and what's false is what makes him look bad, not whether it's actually factual or not. So he's going to the point of accusing one of our greatest allies, South Korea, of futzing with their statistics. And I guess so is Germany and France and Great Britain and Canada and, well, every other one of our friends on the planet. Japan. They're all messing with their statistics. They're all lying. Really? At some point, when some person walks down the street that you meet, maybe with a tinfoil hat on their head, and claims that every single other person in the world is a liar, but they're telling the truth, I think it may be them that has the problem. So we've looked it up. It is 10,000 false and misleading facts in his first 827 days in office. That's 2.5 years. But in 440 days, thank you for this, Mark Grimaldi, my wonderful producer, the president has closed the 20,000 mark. 20,000 mark as of last month. That's 23 lies a day. 23 lies a day. Who tells 23 statements a day? And 23 provable lies a day? You know, I'm just glad there are people out there who can take the time to put all this together. And by the way, if you haven't read it, sometime go to the Washington Post and read the fact checker. And just look at some of those lies. You know, go to line number 14,273 and take a look at line number 17,936 or line number 843. And just look at them for yourselves. They're all documented. But of course, real statistics are not things that any Trumpist or Republican wants to look at. The reporter is pointing out that 1,000 Americans are dying a day. And what's Trump's response?
Dying a day. But I understand on cases it's different.
No, but you're not reporting it correctly, Jonathan.
I think I am, but it's been widely...
See, you're not reporting it correctly. It can't be right. It can't be right that all these Americans are dying. It just can't. It must not be true. Donald Trump's born in Kenya. Cruz's dad tried to kill Kennedy, but no one's dying from the coronavirus. It's all under control. Here's the thing. Every intelligent American knows the president's lying. Every one of us. Not just we liberals. Conservatives know it too. Republicans know it too. Ask your great Republican Trumpist friend in private, whether they really believe that 155,000 Americans are dead from coronavirus. They may argue it's exaggerated. I actually happen to think it's underestimate. I think it's less than reality because not everyone's been tested. We know that we haven't had enough tests. We know that we still can't get enough tests. We still don't have a case for every American who wants a test gets a test. And those that are tested are often waiting 5, 7, 10 days. By the time you get the virus, and it incubates for 4 days, and then you get sick enough to actually realize you're sick and go see a doctor, go to the emergency room, that's a week, 10 days, 2 weeks after you got the disease. And then you wait another 10, 12 days to get your test back. It's a month later after you got the virus. So now you're like, hey, I got the virus. Let's contact check everybody I've been around for the last 30 days. That's not useful data. What they did in South Korea, the reason why their rate is so low, is they tested everybody right away, frequently, every day. And so when they caught someone, they caught it quickly, and they could go and talk to everyone. There's a very unwise South Korean woman, who had fever, was in the hospital, checked out, went to a mega church, and infected hundreds, I think thousands of people between the people she infected and the people those people infected. And even despite her foolishness, the South Korean government was able to find out what she did, contact everybody, and keep their rates down. That's an effective government. One day, I hope we have one. We'll be right back right after this.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates.
Final break, y'all. And we'll be back in 4 minutes. I'm going to move on and talk about Donald Trump's cozy relationship with Vladimir Putin and why he doesn't seem to care that Putin is paying people to kill American soldiers. Remember, Republicans used to care about veterans? They used to claim they loved the people in the military, that their lives matter. I guess military lives don't matter either, even to Republicans. Back after this.
History. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around. And every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just 3 words, sweetheart. Live with courage.
The man that had the best stories still has plenty of stories to tell. So connect virtually and share the conversation of a lifetime at storycorpsconnect.org/AARP. Connect, honor, share. StoryCorps Connect. A message from AARP, StoryCorps, and the Ad Council.
Unfortunately, an exotic flu epidemic has broken out in Washington, D.C. Dubbed the Canadian hot sauce flu, it uniquely afflicts a particular group of Democratic office holders and operatives. CHS flu renders its victims weaker than Canadian hot sauce, leaving them unable to stand boldly for the workaday majority they're supposed to represent. Instead, the afflicted, who are mostly old-line party leaders, are reduced to don't-rock-the-boat corporatism and conservative appeasement when advancing policy ideas. They fear that anything stronger will spook centrist voters. This breakout is a reaction to the recent surge of younger, progressive voters and office holders openly pushing real populist change, including a Green New Deal, taxing the obscene wealth of corporate profiteers, public financing of our public elections, breaking up monopolies, restoring labor rights, free higher education and tech training, and Medicare for all. Far from alienating the electorate, these proposals are generating majority support precisely because they are bold and clearly would benefit, well, the majority. Yet, the protectors of the old money-soaked politics-as-usual system are wailing that the party must move to the center rather than to the left. But wait, their mythological center is way over to the right, hunkered down with corporate interests and blocking working-class progress. This is Jim Hightower saying, the future of the party doesn't require moving left, center, or right. These are ideological positions. Instead, the Dems should move out to the grassroots reality of ordinary Americans. People there are envisioning, electing, and beginning to enact a true progressive agenda to advance our nation's democratic ideals of economic fairness, social justice, and equal opportunity for all. That is a politics of integrity, a politics that is worthy of all of our involvement.
He's a Harvard economist and a Yale lawyer. He does not keep up with the Kardashians. He's Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. We've talked a lot about the coronavirus pandemic, as well we should. It is the story of our day. We should never forget the 157,000 Americans that died, or the next 50,000 Americans that are likely to die this year. It could well be higher. 2020 will go down as one of, maybe the single worst year in American history, given the scale of destruction, of death, epic death, and epic economic casualties. The House of Representatives, controlled by the Democrats, is ready to step in and help Americans survive. The Senate, controlled by Republicans, is determined to make Americans suffer more. Even though it must be repeated, that this is not Americans' fault. Sure, Herman Cain should have worn a mask. Sure, there are a lot of Trump supporters that believe him and take actions that lead to their deaths. There's so many cases in the news, on the internet. It's pathetic. You read to someone who says, I'm an American, I believe in liberty, and I don't believe in wearing masks, and then that person ends up dying a couple weeks after making those statements. But as sad as it is for people to die for listening to the president, what's sadder is the people who spread the lies. Believing lies is a bad thing. Spreading lies is even worse. And it's not just Donald Trump. It's lots of Republicans in the Senate, in the House. Matt Gaetz joking about it, wearing a gas mask, when later on that would turn out to be something that people had to do, particularly facing the tear gas of police, but also facing the coronavirus. But the Senate, including senators who largely helped spread the misinformation, doesn't really care. They think that too many Americans are staying home and not making the economy run just because they care about their little old lives more than they care about the jobs. And Republicans, if there's one thing they've made it clear, is that they don't have any family values. They don't want you to protect you and your family. They want you to get back to work. And if they have to starve you to make it happen, they will. After all, they're not the ones living paycheck to paycheck. Remember when Republicans used to have principles? I didn't share many of them, but I always agreed with them that dictatorship was wrong. I agree with Ronald Reagan that the evil empire was wrong, that Russia was dangerous, and that we shouldn't support a country mistreating its own people. Certainly not one that was an enemy of the United States trying to kill American soldiers. But when Donald Trump was asked about Vladimir Putin putting a bounty, putting a price on the head, rewarding people for assassinating American soldiers, he just didn't think it was important enough to talk about with Vladimir Putin.
Reported that the US has intelligence indicating that Russia paid bounties or offered to pay bounties to Taliban fighters to kill American soldiers. You had a phone call with Vladimir Putin on July 23rd. Did you bring up this issue?
No, that was a phone call to discuss other things.
And you've never discussed it with him?
I have never discussed it with him. No. I would. I'd have no problem with it.
But you don't believe the intelligence? It's because you don't believe the intelligence, that's why.
It never reached my desk. You know why? Because they didn't think it was intelligence. They didn't think it was real.
It was in your written brief, though, apparently.
They didn't think it was worthy of... I wouldn't mind. If it reached my desk, I would have done something about it. It never reached my desk because...
Do you read your written brief?
I do. I read a lot.
Really?
You know, I read a lot. They like to say I don't read. I read a lot.
Your daily intelligence
I comprehend extraordinarily well, probably better than anybody that you've interviewed in a long time.
Yeah, he understands better than anyone that the guy's interviewed. Yeah, okay. He says it never reached his desk. It was in his written brief. So, you know, it's very simple. It was in his brief. So he read it or he didn't. He says he read it, and we know it was in his written brief, and then he said it didn't reach his desk. All those things can't be true, right? It cannot be true that it was in his brief, and he read it, and it didn't reach his desk. Let's just move on.
I did more for the black community than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln, whether you like it or not. People say, oh, that's
you believe you did more than Lyndon Johnson, who passed the Civil Rights Act?
I think I did, yeah.
How?
Because I got criminal justice reform done. I got prison reform.
Lyndon Johnson.
I've done things.
He passed the Civil Rights Act.
How has it worked out? If you take a look at what Lyndon Johnson did.
You think the Civil Rights Act was a mistake?
How has it worked out? Because frankly, it took a long time. But for African Americans, under my administration, Jonathan, under my administration, African Americans were doing better than they had ever done in the history of this country.
How do you think?
So Donald Trump's complaint, if I got this right, is that Lyndon Johnson didn't do much for blacks because even though under his presidency, the United States Congress passed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the law that after 100 years of being denied the right to vote gave black Americans the right to actually cast their ballots, not in the law, but in reality. The Civil Rights Act, it actually said no more are you going to have segregated restaurants and hotels and movie theaters. No more do you have to sit in the back of the bus, Rosa Parks. But Donald Trump's done more. Why? Because Trump says, well, it hasn't gone far enough. He actually said that. Well, he's right. I hate to use those words in connection with Donald Trump. He's right that it hasn't gone far enough. But I think it was a big step forward to let blacks finally vote after 100 years, to give them at least equal rights on paper with Americans. I'm the first to agree it hasn't gone far enough. That's why I marched in several Black Lives Matter protests. And you should too. There's still way too much police violence towards black Americans. Far more likely to be stopped by police, killed by police, frisked by police. Far more likely to be stopped when they're not carrying a weapon. Still less likely to get that job, to get that housing. There's plenty of systemic racism in American society. The reason why blacks are suffering today from the coronavirus more than whites is simply they don't have the income, because poor suffer more than the rich. And black people never had the opportunities white people had to get income. You know, the Homestead Act of 100 years ago that gave free land throughout the Midwest to all those people? Yeah, they were all white people. And I don't remember too many Republicans or Democrats complaining about a handout when it came to white people. I don't even recall anyone complaining about a handout when it comes to subsidies to American farmers who, let's face it, need the subsidies because of Donald Trump's war with China and his putting in tariffs that basically harm Americans and not Chinese. But I digress. Yes, it is true. We have a lot of work to do. And the person who is doing the most work, well, a hero like someone I had the pleasure of knowing briefly, John Lewis. Donald Trump is asked how history will remember the great man who walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge that I think will soon be renamed the John Lewis Bridge, who took beatings and dogs and water cannons by police, came through, became a United States congressman, constantly worked on civil rights, on voting rights, and happens to be, and I met him personally, one of the most humble men I've ever met. And it's rare to say that of a great man like John Lewis. Trump is asked how history will remember John Lewis.
History will remember John Lewis.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose. I never met John Lewis, actually. I don't believe.
Do you find him impressive?
Never really answers that question. Leave it to the President of the United States to think the most salient fact about John Lewis's moment in history is the fact that he didn't attend Donald Trump's inauguration. Folks, this should end soon. If there's a God in heaven, I don't mean to be religious here. Look, it has to end soon. In 3 months, the United States of America will go to the polls, and frankly, most of us will probably vote from home by mail, and I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to talk a lot about the election as it gets closer and how, frankly, Donald Trump can mess it up. How Republicans can try to defund not the police, but the Postal Service, can try to prevent people from mailing in their ballots, can try to make it as hard as possible for people to register and vote. But I think we will. I think we've risked our lives to vote over hundreds of years. And I think we'll finally vote this monster out of office. But when we do, if we do, and I don't mean to take anything for granted, it's vitally important that we get rid of all those Republicans in the Senate and the House and in local government, state legislatures, all across the country, who don't believe that America's governments can care for its citizens. The ones who look at hundreds of thousands of dead and say, it is what it is. Don't elect politicians who don't care about you. That should be a first step for you this election day. Make sure you go and vote. This is Mark Levine signing off.